Welcome to today's FYN Virtual Learning Series session. I'm your host for today, Joshua Frame, National Chair of the Federal Youth Network. C'est mon plaisir d'introduire cette séance avec Alyssa Dodd et puis John Medcoff. So today we have Alyssa Dodd joining us and John Medcoff. Alyssa is with the Canada Revenue Agency, working on character-based leadership. And John Medcoff is the Director General in the Learning Programs branch at the Canada School of Public Service. So I'd like to start off by acknowledging that the land on which I am gathering and joining you from today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial. We're grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. I'd like to also encourage you to reflect on the land on which you're joining us from today and what traditional territory that is. And Marcella, if you can be so kind as to post the link in the chat so that you can figure out, if you don't know already, what traditional territory you are living on and joining us from. Good to reflect on that today. So as we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat. And we would encourage you with the number of participants to share any questions by using the Q&A function, which will appear on your Zoom interface screen. On vous encourage d'utiliser les fonctions questions et réponses pour demander vos questions à Alyssa et puis à John. And that function will help us sort of manage the questions that are coming in and be able to ask those of John and Alyssa. So I'll start off by introducing our speakers. So Alyssa began her public service career at the CRA in 2009, and she was the Ontario Region Chair for the CRA YPN from 2016 to 2018, and co-chair of the Future Leaders of Ontario from 2018 to 2019. She received the CRA Award of Excellence in the category of Future Leader for 2018. And in 2019, she became one of Canada's free agents. She is currently on assignment implementing character leadership at the CRA, where she and her team received the Michelle C. Como HR Leadership Award from the HR Council in 2020. And her favorite job title is Mom. So I think, unless I'm missing something, in 2021 should be a award-winning year for you as well, Alyssa, or at least with some sort of major change or award during that time. So thanks very much for joining us, Alyssa. Et puis notre deuxième conférencier est John Medcoff. John fait partie de l'équipe des compétences transférables de l'École de la fonction publique du Canada. L'équipe organise, conçoit et donne des cours aux fonctionnaires fédéraux afin de les aider à acquérir des compétences et des attitudes générales qui sont pertinentes partout au gouvernement et aussi à l'extérieur du gouvernement. Cela comprend de l'apprentissage lié au sens des affaires, au leadership et aux compétences habilitantes, afin de contribuer à bâtir une fonction publique dynamique, connectée et collaborative. So thanks very much for joining us today, John. And I would encourage our participants to ask questions in your language of choice. And we will endeavor to provide responses in your language of choice as well. Alors, utiliser le fonction question et réponse, so using the Q&A function as I mentioned on your screen. Okay, so we're going to start off with kind of some planned questions that we had and go from there. So to start off with, we'll start with Alyssa. So what is a competency based on your work? And why are they important?
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh. So, I mean, competencies is kind of a loaded word, especially if you have worked for the Canada Revenue Agency. So I'll try not to use the word competencies, but I do mean competencies. I'll use the word skills. So I see competencies just as skills in your repertoire or tools in your toolbox that you need to be successful in your public service career. So they've shifted over time, but really it's, you know, ensuring that you have those skills in your repertoire to feel confident in your abilities. You're capable of showing what you're able to do to those you would like to hire you, to your bosses, to your superiors, and just, you know, having those so that those you work for have the trust in your abilities, right? So if you can prove, I carry around this toolbox full of tools that are unique to me and serve me in whatever role that I have, to show that to people is really great. Like if you're a tradesman and you have your tools with you, people respect you and people will look up to you and want to hire you. So that's what I really see competencies as, and personally, there's no greater feeling in the world than being able to have your boss come to you and say, there's this new thing that we need to get done. I know that you have a wide range of skills. Can you do it? And then just giving you carte blanche to go and do it. And so that's how I see competencies, and that's how I look at them. So yes, we use competencies in staffing. Yes, they're going to assess you on your competencies before they give you a role, give you a job. But really smart public servants look at competencies as, what can I do? What can I learn? What can I add to my skill set that's going to help me find the job that suits me best? Right? So if I'm looking at a job, I'm not just going to look at the salary. I'm going to look at what competencies do they want you to have in that role? Do they match the competencies that I already have, or the skills that I want to learn? Does it fit me? So that's where I see competencies. Yeah.
That makes sense. John, anything to add? So what is a competency based on your work? Alors, qu'est-ce que c'est une compétence et pourquoi est-ce qu'ils sont importants?
Ouais, merci beaucoup de la question, Josh. Et je suis tout à fait d'accord avec tout ce que Alyssa vient de dire. I think some of the things that she mentioned that I also really fundamentally believe is that, competencies can be a word that I think not everybody knows right away how they relate to it and what it means. But fundamentally, it's what are you good at, right? And it can include knowledge and skills and abilities and behaviors and personal suitabilities and all kinds of different things. And I think a key point Alyssa made is that, yes, this is something that hiring managers use in the context of staffing a position, because it helps them define, this is what is needed to succeed in this position. But I'd say, a bit like Alyssa, that competencies are things that we should all be thinking about all the time. It's something that can help us understand and help us define the value that we bring to our work, the value that we bring to our organizations and to our teams. And they also give us, I think, some space to think about how we want to grow, both as public servants and as humans. So I think, we tend to reflect on them or consider them when we're talking about specific jobs, which is they're important to that. But I also think it's something that we should, each and every one of us, be thinking about every day, just from a personal growth perspective.
Absolutely. So the next question to you, John. So how does your workload, so transferable skills, how does that relate to competencies? Alors, comment les compétences transférables sont-elles axées sur les compétences?
Oui, alors, comme tu l'as dit au début, moi, je suis le directeur général d'une équipe à l'École de la fonction publique, l'équipe des compétences transférables. Notre équipe a été créée en 2019. Alors, une équipe toute nouvelle. And basically, we design and deliver learning to help public servants develop skill sets and mindsets, which are basically kinds of competencies, again, that are portable inside, outside, and across government. And, the idea is that these competencies that we're targeting are things that will help people thrive in pretty much any job environment, no matter where they're working. I think that as public servants, we all need competencies maybe beyond the knowledge and skills that used to dominate job postings, right? So we, in our team, we're developing courses and events and podcasts and things on human-focused topics like resilience and navigating change or coaching or how to work in virtual teams and emotional intelligence. But then, some practical things too that I think are competencies in their own rights, like project management, negotiation, briefing, storytelling, how to navigate social media. And I think that these kinds of competencies are really important no matter where you're working. You could be at the CRA, you could be at the Canada School of Public Service, you could be in the private sector, you could be in a management position, in a leadership position, no matter anything you're doing, any job you're working in. I think these kind of human and behavioral skills are really important, and we see them as being key to enabling people to move around the public sector on that journey and take them on to their next position after that. So,
excellent.
Thank you.
Next question over to you, Alyssa. So, how have competencies evolved? Alors, comment les compétences ont-elles évolué? I actually also joined the CRA in 2009. And I remember looking at the, it was a 65-page guide of competencies of each of the like 13, 15 competencies, and the 2-page definition of how do you get to level 1 or level 2 or level 3. But in your view, how have they evolved since that time?
So yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything you just said, Josh. And so that's why the word competency is kind of a loaded word for me, because it became a bad word at CRA. You know, our competency-based human resource management system, in theory, is a wonderful thing. Many years was put into that system, and it did help with staffing. But what it did is it focused on solely getting, you know, getting that level of that certain competency that you had to get a certain job, rather than, like John was saying earlier, we should just be thinking about competencies all the time, not just when we want a job, right? So there's been a shift to a continuous, all the time thinking about competencies, and thinking about it not as like, how do I game the system to get a certain level so they can get a certain job? It's, what can I do? What can I learn to set me apart and set me up for excellence? And we've seen a shift to, in recent years, from the really like hard skills, real technical competencies, to the soft skills. I hate the term soft skills, but that's the term everybody recognizes, to those soft skills, because those technical skills, you can teach them to anybody. You can hire someone off the street and you can teach them those technical skills. It's those soft skills that we're focusing on more now, because those are the things that human beings are uniquely suited to do and robots can't replace, right? So that's the focus nowadays. And John mentioned, you know, those transferable skills are so great because they help you when you're moving around. But I just want to touch on the fact that whether you decide to move around, in the public sector or the private sector, it doesn't matter. Those new assignments, new situations, new scenarios are going to come up, whether you want to stay in your job and stay safe and comfortable or not. It's just the pace of change. So if you can have those soft skills, those transferable skills in your toolbox, then you'll never be caught blindsided. You'll be able to handle whatever's thrown at you. Yeah.
Absolutely. John, same question to you. So how have competencies evolved during your time in government?
It's funny, it's such a great question, because in some ways I feel they've evolved a lot, and in some ways I feel they've kind of stayed the same. For sure, the vocabulary has changed, and I think maybe the way we value them has definitely evolved during my public service career. And, you know, Alyssa said it a moment ago, I think we're maybe seeing less emphasis on knowledge and technical competencies than we used to, and more on the core human and behavioral competencies. It's not to say that the knowledge and technical competencies aren't important. They are. You know, no one in their right mind would hire me as a structural engineer or as an infectious disease scientist or as a coder. I'm like a policy wonk executive guy. But I guess the key thing is that it's no longer enough to have just those technical competencies. You know, we are increasingly appreciating and looking for those behavioral-based or human competencies as well. And I'll maybe give a quick example. We need to hire a new director on our team, and as part of the solidifying a candidate, I started a chat with all the members of the team and said, hey, you know, tell me what you think we should be looking for in our next director. And the responses that were coming back, nobody was saying, oh, they should know the mandate of the Canada School of Public Service, or they should, understand the policy development cycle of the Government of Canada. What we were hearing was a lot of, they should be a human leader, they should have great emotional intelligence, they should know how to collaborate with others, they should be a strong communicator. So it's not only what hiring managers are looking for, I would say, but it's also, these kinds of things are also what team members are looking for in their leaders. So really important to say that, there's an evolution happening for sure. I think it's an evolution that's headed in the right direction. And I'm encouraged to see more and more of these human competencies showing up in job postings. And I think they're all things that these are all skills, as Alyssa said, that we can develop and grow, not just in our professional lives, but in how we are, in our personal lives, in the projects we take on outside of work, because they're all about becoming more complete and rounded humans, right? So the fundamentals maybe haven't changed, but the way we value them has. So.
Yeah, and I think like certainly when I entered government, I think lots of the focus was on, you get managers who were subject matter experts, and now they've kind of moved into a management role. And it's been really good to see the shift to say, let's start with the people who are excellent at dealing with people. And the technical skills can be built over time. You don't necessarily need to have the person who's best at doing that specific job. You need the person who's best at managing those who are doing that specific job, and bringing empathy and bringing people management skills and all of the skills that you need to support a team. I'm going to jump in with a question that came in on the Q&A. So the question was, identifying your own skills or transferable skills can be a challenge. Are there any tips or tricks to help identify what you bring to the table? And I think some of our previous sessions touched on some of those tools like psychometrics, emotional intelligence. But Alyssa, I see you'd like to chime in on this one.
Yeah, no, this is really interesting, because so when I became a free agent 2 years ago, suddenly I felt like I was adrift in an ocean, not knowing, like, how am I going to market myself? Like, I know I have valuable skills, but how am I going to market myself? Like, who am I? What are my skill sets? And who do I want to be, and what other skill sets do I want to learn? So I really went on this self-awareness journey. And one of the tools that I share in my current work on character leadership and developing your character, but also it helps in determining your skill sets, is the work of Dr. Tasha Eurich. Her book is called Insight, and she has a great TED Talk on self-awareness. This book is the best $20 you'll ever spend in developing your self-awareness. Dive in deep and get to know who you are, and not just what you're good at, but what you actually enjoy. Because there are things that I'm good at, but I don't enjoy doing. So make that distinction. That's my best advice. Yeah. That
makes sense. And John, what are your thoughts around identifying your own skills, and any tips and tricks to figure out what you're bringing to the table?
Yeah, again, I think that's a really good question, because we need to, as we were saying before, not think about skills and competencies as something we're doing just for the purpose of getting a job, but something we're thinking about for our own personal growth. And I think a lot of it is self-reflection, right? It's thinking about, what are the things I value? What are the things that are important to me? What are the places where I think I've been able to have a positive impact? But then as well, talk to your colleagues. Seen me perform where you might point to things that I've been able to do to help. And we should always, I think, not only be thinking of what we can do now, but what we want to do, and not just what are the competencies I have today, but what are the competencies I would like to develop more in the future? What are the opportunities I would like to have to try new things, to stretch my competencies and my skills a little bit? Because I think, nobody, for all of us, competency building and skill building is an ongoing journey, something we're going to be doing constantly, and being a little bit intentional about it and spending time thinking about it and sort of being introspective is one thing, and seeking the advice and input of people who you know will give you honest insights is also really helpful.
Absolutely. Great advice there. So the next question, over to you, Alyssa. So on the free agent program, which is just finishing up their most recent recruitment, and you joined about 2 years ago. But what are the 14 attributes found in the free agent program?
So first, we use the word attributes, but really they're competencies, they're skill sets, right? So it doesn't matter what word we use. They're just skills that you would have. So I'm going to read them because I don't want to get them wrong. Okay, so these are the 14. No need to memorize. So there are things like courage, passion, humility and empathy, team-orientedness, creativity and resilience, outcomes-focused, curiosity, reflectiveness, action-orientedness, persuasiveness, problem-solving, and quick learning. So now it is, you know, for a number of those 14 attributes, you can quickly link them to the key leadership competencies. You can link them to the character leadership dimensions that I'm currently working on. You can link them to a number of different competencies in different departments across government. But what we see in these particular attributes, which is that shift John and I have been talking about, is there's a human element there, right? So I think for the longest time, we have avoided these type of attributes because people thought that they were intangible, hard to assess. We assess them, and when we're doing our free agent processes, so we're able to say if do these people have these 14 attributes, we're going to hire them as free agents. Once you become a free agent, your performance reviews are based on these 14 attributes. So it can be done. We no longer have to choose between those hard skills and those soft skills. You can have both, right? It's the best of both worlds. So those are the attributes that the free agent program uses, particularly like the ones where it's about like empathy and humility, those human aspects. So that's where we see some shift happening. And it's really, it's the future of competencies within the public service. We're seeing a lot of different departments adopt these type of attributes.
Absolutely. And just to expand on that a little bit, I know you were one of the first people to get some of your competencies sort of blockchained in a way. I don't really understand anything about how that works. But do you want to talk a little bit about that process and how that's kind of useful in terms of some of the comments that we're seeing of, you know, people sort of being frustrated with the process of applying for a job and having to, you know, rewrite, you know, here's why I'm good at this in, you know, 1,000 words or 2,000 words every single time they apply for a new job.
Right. Because half the battle is obtaining those competencies and the other half is being able to show people that you have them, right? So I don't know a lot about it, but yes, so there is a group within the federal public service that is working on this initiative where once you have been assessed that, yes, you have this competency. So I have been assessed that I have these 14 attributes because I am a free agent. So they have created this blockchain certification where you can just literally send this virtual certificate that says, I have these competencies. And it's really great. So I haven't checked in a while on where they're at with their progress, but I would love to see it go across the public service. Each department has their own competency, so I don't know how that will work, but it's a step in the right direction, and it would help alleviate that second part of the painful process of competencies. Yes. Absolutely.
John, maybe we can have you discuss that a little bit in terms of sort of the future of applying your competencies to selection processes and kind of what you see happening over the coming years to try to simplify and try to reduce the burdens for applicants, but also for people who are, for hiring managers, for people who are evaluating people's applications in the selection process. But how can we do a better job of evaluating those competencies?
Je crois que ça commence tout d'abord avec la personne qui va offrir un poste. Alors, on a une tendance dans la fonction publique de définir très étroitement quels sont les besoins et de mettre l'emphase sur ses compétences techniques. Mais je crois que on peut quand même écrire nos postes ou décrire nos postes en permettant ceux qui aimeraient poser leur candidature de nous raconter un peu une histoire au lieu de tout simplement dire voilà la compétence, dites-moi ou disez-moi dans 100 mots ou 200 mots comment vous rencontrez ce besoin. So it's about doing things like not just having it be a checklist during the job process, but giving people space to tell their story a little bit, to describe their own superpowers, to unstructure the process a little, and to create that space for people to go beyond just the technical and describe some of the human values that they bring. So definitely there's a part we can do when we are putting up job posters, when we are defining the competencies. Nous, les leaders dans la fonction publique, on a un rôle très important à jouer dès le début. Mais je dirais aussi que pour les candidats, il y a quand même une opportunité de raconter notre histoire, même dans les 200 mots. Oui, évidemment, souvent on nous demande d'offrir des preuves de nos compétences, et je crois qu'on peut le faire de façon très technique, mais on peut aussi ajouter des éléments qui nous permettent à raconter cette histoire là où on a assez on est capable de raconter un peu non seulement la compétence technique, mais pourquoi nous trouvons que c'est important ou dans quelle situation on a développé cette compétence. We need to push the hiring system even when they don't ask for it. We should still tell them the story.
Absolutely. And I see in our chat that there's some reference to Talent Cloud. We did do a segment with Talent Cloud in August, and we had a previous webcast with them right before they launched, actually in September of 2018 as well. So I think Talent Cloud is overall kind of looking at this process as well. Currently geared towards external applicants, but in trying to simplify the process of, do you have the skills that we require, and providing a bit more information for applicants on, who's the person you'll be working for, what are some of the key things that you want to know that usually you don't have an opportunity to ask until later in the hiring process, like, can you work remotely? Are there flexible work hours? What's the sort of setup for the job? So Marcella has shared the recording to that session back in August, so I encourage you all to check that out. And certainly it's one of a number of initiatives that's trying to simplify this process so that people are not spending 5 hours or 10 hours applying for a job. For those of you who have applied for anything on LinkedIn before, some of those processes can take like 4 minutes. And lots of that really makes sense, I think, in terms of, Alyssa, what you spoke of in terms of these the blockchain certification for your competencies, rather than each department evaluating it every single time you apply for a job. It doesn't really make sense. But certainly we hope to see more positive movement in terms of that going forward. Alyssa, over to you in terms of the free agent programs and the 14 attributes or competencies. How are these different from, say, the CRA or the key leadership competencies? What are the sort of biggest differences that you see there?
Well, so we've mentioned it a little bit today in terms of like the shift from the very technical to the soft skills. Absolutely, we see that when we look at things like courage, and what do we have, like humility and empathy and things like that. And what's interesting is, so those are very different from what we've seen at CRA in the past, where it was like effective interactive communication and things like that. What's interesting is, so the 14 attributes of the free agent program, they align very closely with the 11 dimensions of character leadership. So character leadership, I saw that Marcella put the wheel there in the chat. So they're things like judgment, courage, drive, humanity, humility, temperance. They all relate to one another. Oftentimes they are the same. So they both these 14 attributes has courage, and both the 11 dimensions of character has courage as well. So they relate to one another. And when we're implementing character into staffing at CRA, what's interesting is what we're doing is we're elevating character dimensions like courage alongside the key leadership competencies. So we're using them both. So all executive level staffing processes right now, we assess the key leadership competencies from the Treasury Board, and then we assess character to get that human element, right? So we want to make sure they have both the technical competencies to do the job, but they also have the optimal character, humanity to be a leader at that level, right? So it's the best of both worlds. You need both of them, absolutely. It's just like John said earlier, we're seeing this shift because now there was only a focus on the technical. We don't want to shift too far to the right where it's only a focus on character. We want to meet in the middle, right? And so that's the 14 attributes of the free agents. We were getting there. And now I think the character leadership model pushes us all the way. So if you combine all the key leadership competencies, the 14 attributes and the 11 dimensions of character together, I think that's where you find a well-rounded person, which is what John was saying, you know, get a well-rounded person, make sure that you have like that toolbox full of skills that are going to make you a well-rounded just person in general. And that's how you become successful no matter what job you're going for. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. There is no technical competency for being an excellent person. So, yeah, it makes sense that this all kind of works in harmony. It's not a matter of, you know, we should throw out the technical competencies or only harness, you know, one side. It's really being able to link these all together and figure out, you know, how that can properly assess.
We're not robots, right? This is what I say often. We're not robots. And if we were only assessed on technical competencies, you would think that we are robots. So when John was talking about like giving people the opportunity to tell their story and show who they are as a full person, that's what we're moving towards. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, a next question that we have from a participant, a little bit, I guess, around competency. So how does one self-advocate and seek out opportunities? I guess this is a relatively general question, but maybe we can kind of link it back to how are you demonstrating competencies to your supervisor, to your manager? But John, do you have any thoughts around that? How does one sort of self-advocate? How does it kind of link in with understanding your skill set and how you're able to kind of link that with seeking out opportunities?
Yeah, and I think the two really do go hand in hand or are very complementary to one another, because some of this is what we all do in our jobs day to day, en parlant avec notre superviseur. Moi, j'essaie toujours d'être très honnête, de dire voilà les compétences que j'ai maintenant et voilà les compétences que j'aimerais beaucoup développer ou les expériences que j'aimerais avoir pendant que je travaille dans cette équipe. Et si on travaille avec un leader qui s'intéresse à développer les membres de leur équipe, je crois que c'est à nous de communiquer un peu quelles sont les compétences qu'on aimerait développer. When it comes to how do we sort of get out there and you know, market ourselves a little bit, I think part people through networks, either, you know, contacts you've made through individuals you already know, or through things like Twitter or LinkedIn or other social media platforms that allow you to kind of find people who have interests common to yours and reach out. I had, when we were first starting our transferable skills team,
I think we temporarily lost John, but we'll go back to, oh, maybe he's
when
back.
When we first created our transferable skills team, I wrote a blog.
Okay. We'll go back to John in a second. Maybe just some instability on the.
Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Now you are.
Okay. I was going to say that when we first created the transferable skills team, I wrote a blog post that said, "Hey, this is who we are and how we work." And somebody wrote me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I really like the way your team is set up. I'd love to learn more about the work that you do. So that person took it upon themselves to kind of find an organization whose values and whose sort of ways of working and culture aligned with their competencies, and just reached out of the blue. What do you lose by sending someone a message via a social media platform? Maybe they'll say no, maybe they'll ignore you, but very often it can be something that leads to a conversation. And maybe it won't be that person you work with, but they'll say, hey, based on what you're telling me, I know somebody in another team who I think would really benefit from someone who brings your skills and competencies. So absolutely, don't hesitate to reach out, to build that network. I'm an introvert, so it's not always easy for me to do, but somehow when we're doing it virtually, it I think makes it a little bit more comfortable, even for those of us who maybe don't feel naturally that we're very good at marketing ourselves. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And a great question. So I see that we have a question in the Q&A just around what is a free agent. So I think we might have jumped into Melissa is a free agent.
Right.
Here are the free agent competencies. Put relatively simply, like a free agent is a person who is deployed to work on projects that are selected, like proposed by departments. And they work on those projects for, it could be 6 weeks, it could be 6 months. Alyssa, I think you've been on this project for like 20 months, 2 years. Yeah. So projects ranging in time, and the difference is that you're not on a secondment to that department. You're a free agent and deployed to a department which manages your next assignments and sort of simplifies some of the HR processes. Does that kind of capture it?
Yeah, like my 10-second spiel is always: a free agent is an indeterminate public servant who will belong to one of 3 departments as your home department. So I belong to Transport Canada, but I never have to work for Transport Canada. I can go out on assignment for any length of time with any department in the public service. And I search out and find my own work, or I choose assignments that, departments say, we have this great project, we need a free agent, and they'll send us the information and we'll decide whether we want to take that. In a nutshell, that's what it is. I just saw something pop up though, because somebody was asking about the VIA Institute of Strengths and Character, and if it's closely related to the IV. They are separate, but if you look at the list of VIA's character traits and the list of IV's character dimensions, there's going to be overlap, right? It's just that VIA has a lot more. So I just wanted to answer that question quick.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alyssa. So we'll move on to the next question. So in today's environment, what competencies are most important in your view? So John, we'll start with you. Alors, dans cet environnement, dans cet contexte, quelles compétences sont les plus importantes?
Yeah, and this is an amazing question. I think really drives a lot of what we've been talking about. Look, we're living in disruptive times, right? Rapid advancement of technology, the 24-hour news cycle, declining trust in public institutions, the sort of hyper-personalization of our information environments, the pandemic. These things are all fundamentally changing Canadian society and fundamentally changing what it means to be a public servant in the 21st century. And I think the pace of this change is only accelerating and is only going to keep accelerating. So what does that mean for us as an employer? What does that mean for us as an institution? I don't think we can even really accurately predict what are going to be the challenges we tomorrow. What are going to be the problems that we have to solve? So how can we be ready to solve them if we don't even know what complex? And they're probably going to require multi-sectoral solutions. The big challenges we face today are things that one group or one team or one organization can't really solve on their own. And I think we can take that and we can think about what that means for us as a public service and think about what it means for the kinds of competencies we should be investing in. Knowledge outside of specialized fields is becoming increasingly commoditized and is available in a real-time, quick search query. You can learn anything about transferable skills, anything about leadership you want to know about project management, you can go find it. So what are the key skills we're going to need to thrive in this environment of uncertainty? And our team is part of a working group of other public servants who's been looking at sort of studies from around the world, from academia, from the public sector to the private sector, that's sort of looking at what are the key future skills that we're going to need to thrive. And the same things come up over and over and over again in these things. And we've sort of used them as some of the foundations for our work in transferable skills. And the 5 that we point to that are really important, I think, are number 1, collaboration. If we're going to solve these wicked problems, we need to be working collaboratively with people from different organizations, different sectors, etc. Creative thinking and innovation, because when you don't have your usual tools to solve a problem, when you need to find a new way, being able to think creatively is increasingly important. Communication, no matter how good your idea is, no matter how great your solution is, if you can't communicate it, it's probably not going to get very far. Critical thinking, how do we solve problem solving itself, and being able to understand how a problem can be solved is something that is really valuable. So that's not necessarily something you can read about, but figuring out how to be a good problem is important. And then the last thing I'd say is sort of curiosity or a growth mindset, being interested in discovering new things and kind of pushing your own limits. À mon avis, dans tous les secteurs, dans toutes les agences, dans tous les ministères, dans toutes les équipes, quel que soit le dossier sur lequel une personne travaille, ces compétences de la collaboration, de la communication, etc., sont extrêmement importants et seront nécessaires pour travailler, pour résoudre les problèmes auxquels nous ferons face dans l'avenir.
Absolutely, John. Oui, je pense que la créativité, l'innovation, c'est les compétences du gouvernement en 2020, en 2021. Et puis, je pense que le contexte a changé beaucoup pendant les dernières 10 années pour que les positions, ce ne sont pas certainement de faire comme votre dossier et c'est tout qu'on expecte de cette position. C'est de voir comment on peut le faire d'une meilleure façon et comment est-ce qu'on peut avoir des changements qui sont plus efficaces dans le travail, qui sont plus concentrés sur les utilisateurs de cette type de service. So I think you brought us some really key points, and I think that's really true of the skill sets that we need for the next 10 or 20 years in government. And I think even when Alyssa and I started, lots of the skills that were needed for government in 2009 were more like, can you process this file? How many files can you process per hour? And that's really fundamentally changed because all of those, not all of that work, but lots of that work can be done through automation, through risk management of various checks and systems, and it doesn't have to be processed by a human. Alyssa, as you alluded to, the work of the human, the empathy cannot be told to AI, at least not yet. But I don't know if Skynet is coming, but sorry, very dated reference. So if you know that reference, then you're certainly more in the age bracket that we are. So Alyssa, one of the questions we have in the Q&A, so how are you able to assess soft skills? So maybe we can take it with the free agent program example. How would you assess, empathy? What would someone put on their resume to prove that? I mean, you could list it as one of your core skills is empathy. But how do you look at those 14 skills for the free agent program, for example?
So like if I think back to my very lengthy multi-staged selection process to become a free agent, there was a lot of just observing us working as a team in an experience and seeing, if this person was put in this situation, how would they react? And so it's very, you can tell quite quickly when you put somebody into a situation they're not expecting and watching how they react. You can tell, are they exercising empathy? Do they have humility? Are they able to say to the person on their team, I don't know how to do this, but it seems like you do, you take the lead, right? And or times where it's like, you know what, I think I've got a handle on this, I'm going to take it. So you're showing leadership skills, or if you sit, so this is the thing, for the longest time, when it came to character in particular, it wasn't assessed because we thought it couldn't be assessed. But research over many, many years recently has shown it can be. And we, I think, intuitively know that it can be, because if you spend any length of time with a colleague, you can tell whether they have empathy. You can tell whether they have humility. You can tell whether they are good communicators, whether they're good collaborators. In terms of how you would show that on a resume, I'll be honest, I have no idea. I don't like resumes. They're too static. So I'm hoping that LinkedIn is great, because LinkedIn, there's a little bit of flexibility there. But for instance, when it comes to the free agent program, yes, you submit a resume, but you can submit a video about who you are, right? You can do some storytelling. That's how you get to know who this person really is. Because if you were to look at my resume, you wouldn't be able to tell that it matches me. You really wouldn't. So I would say maybe seek out opportunities to show who you are on through other mediums. Like, for instance, John was saying, like, he's an introvert, so it might be a little bit easier for him in this day and age of social media. I myself am an introvert. It was very hard for me to market myself and go out and create a network. But you can do that on Twitter, and you can share who you are on Twitter, and people will get to know really who you are as a full person, not just what's written on your resume. So I wish I could give you more definitive answers there, but that's my personal opinion. Yeah.
Absolutely, Alyssa. And just to mention, you can also overshare on Twitter, but that's a different topic that will be addressed at Career Bootcamp 2021. We're talking about making connections and branding yourself in this new atmosphere. So I see we have a lot of different questions in the chat. So I'll see what we have in terms of what's sort of most relevant. Lots of questions around, how do I sort of track competencies? How do I, kind of keep track of like what I've worked on, what competencies I showed in that time? So do either of you have a sort of favored method of how to do that? I'll say for myself, I keep track of examples whenever I'm applying to a job that if there's an experience statement, I copy and paste that into a master spreadsheet just so I can not have to replicate that at a future time. But in terms of tracking your competencies, tracking the skills that you're developing, do either of you have a sort of preferred method to do that?
I'm going to give it to John, unless I've got some stuff, but John, you can go first.
Sure. Yeah, I think, I've seen people do some really creative things. Alyssa, I loved it before I mentioned, like, the CV is just not a good tool for storytelling. The traditional CV certainly isn't, but I have seen some people do amazing things where in a visually effective CV, they have sort of put little badges and things of the places, sort of quotes from people they've worked with before. And I think we need to get out of this mindset that a CV is somewhere we'll list, this is the job I held, and this traditional boundaries can offer us an opportunity to tell a more interesting and fulsome story about who we are, and can almost become that repository of competencies for us. Alors, moi, j'ai vu des CV qui étaient documents qui présentaient des atouts et des compétences, non pas dans une liste de chaque poste dans laquelle la personne a travaillé et quelles étaient leurs responsabilités lors de de l'époque où ils ont travaillé dans ce poste, mais qui était axé plutôt sur, here's some things that you should know about me, and here are the jobs that they've applied in. So it was almost, instead of being the job with a list of competencies, it was, here's who I am, and here's some jobs where I've applied them. And it really kind of turns on its head the model of the CV being traditional. Now, are you going to get screened out of some process because you threw in a wacky CV that didn't really fit people's traditional definition of what a CV looked like? Maybe, but is that the job you wanted in the first place? If that's the way they think, I would argue, right? Be bold. Don't be afraid to push the boundaries of how you can tell your story within a process. And if someone is going to say, oh, well, that's, outside the definition of what a CV should be, you ask yourself if that's really the kind of organization you want to work in the first place. So I think the CV is a great vehicle as long as we are willing to think outside the box a little about how we can use it as a competency storytelling piece rather than just as a list of experience.
Absolutely. Over to you, Alyssa.
Yeah, so I mean, get creative, but even outside of how you're going to present that information, what I just recently did actually, and I highly recommend it, is just to sit down and do a year in review. And so literally just say, what did I do in the month of January? What did I do in the month of February? And so what I did, I keep everything in my Outlook calendar. So if I go back into my Outlook calendar, I know what I did for work. If I look at my social media, I know what I did personally. But it was really eye-opening for me because I thought, 2020 has been a crap year. I haven't really done anything. And I went through that exercise and I said, wow, I did a lot of things. And I was able to say, that was the first time I've ever done that before. And I learned something new. And now it is a skill that I can say that I have. And if I was just to sit there and think off the top of my head, what are the skill sets that I have, I wouldn't have recognized that as a skill set that I have without having to do that year in review, that deep reflection. You guys are so much more than what is on your CV, right? There's so much more to you, that you have more skills than you even recognize that you have. And also reach out to other people and say, what do you think are my greatest skill sets? What do you think I'm really good at? What do you think I really enjoy doing? Because sometimes other people know us better than we know ourselves. So I just wanted to give that piece of advice. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have kind of a general question in the Q&A around how much should you rely on the support of your manager? I guess in terms of career development or competency development. I'll start off by saying that you should rely on the support of your manager to the extent that they can be helpful. So I think the first step is sort of establishing what kind of support your manager can provide and what kind of support they're willing to provide, and kind of going from there. So I don't think there's a universal, a universal way to approach that a manager should do X, Y, Z in terms of your career development or competency development. But John, do you have any other thoughts on relying on the support of your manager in terms of career development and competency development? John might be slightly frozen at this time. Oh, sorry, and now you've gone frozen. Okay, perfect.
I'm maybe just sitting very still and pondering the question, but no, I think I'm a little bit choppy, and I'll apologize for that. Look, a manager is somebody who can become your greatest champion, who can become, an enabler for you. I really enjoy working with people who are honest with me about the things I'm good at and the things I'm not good at, and I appreciate that feedback. But I would encourage people to look beyond their manager as well. De parler à nos collègues, de parler à des gens dans d'autres équipes avec qui nous travaillons souvent, et de penser comment ces personnes aussi pourraient nous donner de l'appui ou du support en cherchant pour des nouveaux postes. Support of a manager is helpful, but you can do lots without the support of a manager if maybe there's not a great fit between you and your manager. But there are other people in your team, there are other people in your organization, there may be people in partner organizations who focus more on who is it who can help enable me. And maybe it's somebody who is my supervisor, but maybe it's somebody who's a colleague, or maybe it's somebody who works on my, not only to the director or the DG, but that they speak to other members of the team and they get to know the other members of the team and they have an opportunity to tell their story to other members of the team. Because I think the more we're kind of making those connections, the better we are able to tell our stories. So yes, talking to managers and having supportive managers is helpful, but I would encourage people to look beyond their managers and to look to other people who can be their advocates and their enablers. Some of the best advocates and enablers I have are people who on paper are maybe more junior members of our organization, but just bring such great wisdom and such interesting insights to the way they think about human relationships that I've learned a ton from them, even though maybe on paper they're not my boss.
Yeah, absolutely. Alyssa, anything to add?
No, I mean, that was brilliant. That was great, John. So I just worry, like, there are some people that may find themselves in a situation where they feel like they're stuck. There's no development to be had in their current position. You know, their supervisor isn't giving anything, but don't get stuck because of that. There's so many things that you can do for yourself. And that's why I think it's great that, you know, the free agents and the character leadership, they focus on courage. So utilize some courage, and just be confident in your abilities and say, listen, like, be open and honest and say, I want to move forward. I want to do these things. Is there anyone who can help me or help yourself? So one of the things that I was thinking, I'll share it with Marcella afterwards, is free agents run their careers a little bit differently. Like we do a lot of it ourselves. We have to. We don't have a manager who can do it for us. But there was a document created, and it's titled How to Run Your Career Like a Free Agent Without Having to Be a Free Agent. So I'm going to get that for you guys, because there's some great tips in there for, like, if you have to self-advocate because you don't have a cheerleader or a mentor, there are a lot of things you can do. So I'll get you guys that document.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alyssa. So we have time for, I think, one more question, and then we'll end off here. I see we have a lot of different sort of comments in the Q&A around, you know, why are so many positions kind of asking for specific experience that you can only really gain in that position? I think that's sort of an interesting question, and certainly one that we can continue on further at Career Bootcamp 2021 from January 26th to February 3rd. And certainly to say that there's been a lot of progress in the government of Canada in terms of looking for potential, as opposed to, you know, somebody who's done the exact task that you're looking for right now. I see we have a question around the, can I still become one of Canada's free agents? You can. The application process just concluded for this round, but generally the recruitments are every sort of 6 or 12 months, depending on the time period. Yeah, I think overall, like, maybe we can go to kind of each of you for sort of final thoughts around this this topic of competencies, and what you would advise our audience who definitely have kind of a varied experience in terms of trying to figure out their competencies and then trying to apply those. But John, maybe we'll go to you for sort of final thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I think if I could encourage one thing, it would be, don't start with the list that exists on, you know, on a particular job poster. Sit down and write down the list of things that you think are your superpowers, that you bring to the various things you do in your life, whether it's at work, at home, in your hobby, on your sports team, etc. And write up a list of the things that you think enrich in your life and the things that are that bring value to you. Et une fois que vous avez rédigé cette liste, ensuite prenez la liste pour un concours en particulier et de regarder cette liste et de voir s'il y a un bon fit. Too often we think about how we match something that's out there as the starting point, but really starting from the point of just thinking about, this is who I am and this is what I bring, and also this is what I want to learn, and then finding the positions that might fit with that is probably going to lead to a better fit than if you're trying to make yourself align with something that that, you know, is maybe not as much aligned with who you are. And of course, that list you have is sometimes going to need to be adjusted and tweaked. I think I like your question of kind of develop our list of competencies. And what I'm suggesting is we do just that. And we look for the jobs that match with those. And on the question of having any interview I'm running, I always ask the question, what do you want to learn, before I ask the question, what is your experience? And I think that should be a part of all of our storytelling more, is what do we want to learn, not just what have we done.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, John. Alyssa, your final thoughts.
How do I follow that? That was beautiful. So I think maybe the only thing that I would add is, that's start there. That's the base. It's the beautiful place to be. But then also, I tell this to people all the time, don't limit yourself. So let's say you figure out what your skills are, you figure out what you really want to do, what you're good at, what you love doing. But don't limit yourself. Don't like people set 5-year goals. I'm going to do this. Don't limit yourself to that, right? Because you never know. Take a new risk. You never know what new thing is going to come out that you didn't even think about before, right? You didn't even think about, oh, maybe I would like to do that, or maybe I would be good at that. And maybe like just take some little educated risks every now and then. Try something new. I always like to tell people, like, don't be afraid to suck at something, because that's how you get good at something, right? So, maybe you suck at home while you're learning and you don't show people until you're kind of good, but take some risks, and curiosity, continuous learning. That's what I'll leave you with. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Alyssa. So thanks very much, Alyssa. Thanks very much, John. This concludes the final FYN Virtual Learning Series event for 2020. I think this is number 75 or 76, which I'm not actually joking. It has been a wonderful 9 months of delivering this programming. And in January, of course, we will be starting Career Bootcamp on January 11th. There will be a session on optimizing your Career Bootcamp experience, which will be talking about the platform and how to tailor your learning needs to the event. So participate in the sessions that are interesting to you, and tailor your time for Career Bootcamp. And then we will be hosting Career Bootcamp from January 26th to February 3rd, of course, all virtual, given the context we're in right now. So make sure to register for that, because it will be an incredible learning experience, and a great way for you to connect with colleagues from across Canada and across the government of Canada. Alors, merci à nos conférenciers aujourd'hui, Alyssa et puis John. Merci à tous nos participants de partout au Canada. Et bonne journée à tous. Et on va vous rejoindre le 11 janvier pour optimiser votre expérience pour le camp de carrière 2021. Et puis de janvier le 26 jusqu'au 3 février pour le camp de carrière 2021. Alors, merci à tous. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. Happy holidays, and we'll see you again on January 11th. Thanks again.